everybody. Welcome to Joining Boards of Directors, Leading and Learning with Mark John Stewart. My name is Kristen Nilsson, Vice Chair of Next Niagara. Some of you may have seen me at the start, so lovely to see you again. Mark John is the Managing Director of Wentworth Strategy Group, where he leads a team of high-performing consultants delivering expert advice to nonprofit, for-profit, and public sector organizations globally. He is an advisor to the charity Empowerment Squared and serves in governance and advisory capacities with Bay Area Health Trust and the Disability Justice Network of Ontario. I was able to chat with Mark John while we were putting our conference speaker schedule together, and I know that the information he shares with us today about pathways to joining boards of directors, how you can contribute to the community, and also build your skills and professional profiles will be extremely beneficial and hopefully motivate some of you to get involved, especially when there are so many organizations in the Niagara region who would benefit from young professional talent and perspectives. So without further ado, I will pass it to you, Mark John, to share your screen and get us started.
Amazing. Thank you, Kristen, and really looking forward to chatting with everyone today. I hope your morning's off to a great start with the conference. Before I say anything, I have to give a shout out to the organizers that I've engaged with: Savannah, Alexis, Trisha, Kristen, Karina, and I know there's others. Thank you for volunteering your time to put this event together for the benefit of all the participants and attendees. And I say that because I'm 38 and I was informed by the organizers that I still hit the cutoff for being a young professional, so I still get to be part of your club. But when I was getting going in my career, being part of young professional networks was a very formative part of how I came up in the business world. I started getting involved. I'm in Hamilton, so close by to you in Niagara, and started getting involved in helping create and develop and participate in young professional networks around 2010. So it's been 12 years for me now, and I can say that I've made countless friends, clients, relationships, partners. It's been such a rich part of who I am as a professional and being involved in my community. So I want to say kudos to the organizers. I want to say to the rest of you, I really encourage you to stay part of activities and events like this and to get actively involved. And there's, with saying all that, there's a particular path that I engaged in that I found really rich and rewarding as part of my professional development and as part of being parts initiatives and associations. And that's being part of boards of directors. And so that's the very specific topic that I'm looking forward to chatting with everybody about today. So I'm just going to share my screen and get started. Just getting myself set up here. Give me a second, everybody. Thank you. Excellent. So my thesis today and what I want you to consider is really straightforward. I want you to consider joining small nonprofit board of directors. And the second point there is doing an excellent job. And I'll explain that second point in a little bit more detail. But as I mentioned, along my professional journey, being parts of boards of directors, relating to boards of directors, advising boards of directors has been an extremely rich part of both leading. So I've been able to see the influence, the change, the difference that I've been able to make in my community through being part of boards of directors. I'm going to talk about that in detail. And also on the learning side. So in terms of my development as a professional, in terms of my ability to advance my career, in terms of my personal brand and reputation, being parts of boards of directors has been a credible part of my journey. And the reason why I wanted to speak on it with everybody today is I kind of had to find my own adventure along the way in terms of relating to boards of directors. And so I've kind of pieced together my experience and, I've learned a lot of lessons along the way. So I was really excited when I saw this conference come up to have the opportunity to speak about it with you. So I know some of you, this may be a topic you're unfamiliar with. You've heard of the term concept board of directors, but you're not very familiar. Some of you may be quite familiar. Some of you may be on board of directors. So what I'd like to do today is kind of hopefully give something to everybody. I want to go through an overview of the concept, to kind of give you a really clear idea of what it is and some useful ways that you can look at it. And then I want to close off by giving some advice and perspective about how you might consider engaging with this opportunity as part of your professional journey. So as I was putting together this presentation today, It was kind of neat. I was reflecting on where this all started for me. So this is a picture from 10 years ago at Harvard Business School. I'm there on the left side. On the right side is my colleague, Matt. So we attended a program on nonprofit board leadership at Harvard in 2012, and people flew in from all over the world. And it was a fascinating experience for us because, again, I was early in my young professional journey, and I got to hear these perspectives on how people were driving very significant change from their seats of being governors, of being parts of boards of directors. And it was extremely kind of inspiring and motivational for me. And it prompted me to really go down this path as part of my professional journey. For my colleague, Matt, it actually turned him into towards politics. So he served as a member of, a member of Hamilton City Council in Ward 3 in Central Hamilton, and is now the member of Parliament for Hamilton Centre. And we're actually going to talk about in this presentation as well, how even doing things like being involved in politics is actually very much aligned with the concept of being part of a board of directors. So part of the reason I put up this little picture is because I'm actually traveling back to Harvard this weekend to do another program related to this topic. It's one that I've continued on in my professional journey. So just wanted to show a little flash on where this started for me. And throughout the presentation, I'm going to talk about different ways that I've engaged with this space in this world as prompts for you to be thinking about how you might consider engaging with boards of directors. So just to jump in here, what are we talking about? I know everybody on this presentation has heard the term before, a board of directors, and you have a general idea of what they are. But when it comes to this concept, the specifics and the nuances are actually very important. So, I've kind of learned over time exactly what a board of directors is and how it does. I wish that somebody had laid it out in clear language, or as clear as language can be around this topic, because a lot of it is kind of legal and legislative. But I want to walk through these statements that I've put on the side here, because they serve as kind of a very foundational understanding to what a board of directors actually is. So I'm just going to start at the top and walk through a little bit. Some of the particulars are quite relevant. So a board of directors, it's an executive committee. So it's a group of people that jointly supervise the activities of an organization. That jointly word is very important. I'm going to show you a concept of like an org chart soon. But on a board of directors, and especially today, I'm going to be focusing on the concept of smaller nonprofit boards of directors. The board is jointly responsible for the affairs of an organization. It's not any individual person. There may be a chairperson or other specific executive roles, but all the board members collectively are responsible for the supervision, and all typically will have a vote and a say. And another important nuance is they report to and act on behalf of shareholders. So if you think about it from the perspective of a large public for-profit business, take one of the Canadian banks, they'll have a board of directors, and that board of directors reports to shareholders. In other words, everybody that holds shares of a business. In the case of a small nonprofit organization, that organization will define its shareholders. Sometimes the shareholders are just considered to be the board of directors themselves, but some may have a membership program. So for example, the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce has a board of directors. It's a small, as an association, it's a small nonprofit. And that board of directors acts on behalf of the shareholders, or in other words, all the members of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce. So that's how that process works. And once a year, there will be an annual general meeting, and all the shareholders or the members are invited to appoint the board of directors the next year. In other words, they're saying, these are the people that we would like to act in a supervisory capacity on our behalf over the course of the next year. So the second paragraph is also quite relevant as well. So a board has powers, has authorities, has duties and responsibilities, so things that it has to do. And what these things are determined by two big factors. One is government regulations, including the jurisdiction's corporate law. So for example, here in Ontario, a small nonprofit corporation may be incorporated in Ontario, in which case it's primarily got to follow the rules. There's an Ontario Nonprofits Corporation Act, and there's details spelled out in that act that the board and the corporation have to abide by. or an organization in Ontario may be federally incorporated, in which case there's rules and procedures set out by the federal government of Canada as to how a board of directors has to conduct itself. So there are rules that you have to, as an organization and as a board of directors, abide by. And then there are the rules that you make up yourself. So the bottom two sentences there, the organization's own constitution and bylaws. So there's things you have to do, and then you say, but in addition, we are going to conduct ourselves according to these values, to these principles, to these procedures. So now we have a set of rules, and basically the board of directors is responsible for supervising and ensuring the organization is doing well, is thriving, it's working towards its mission, and that it's in compliance, that it's following the rules that are set out. So I know I used a bunch of words that may be new to some of you there, and some legalese. But if you are considering joining or participating in a board of directors, it's very important that you understand the particularities and the nuances and the responsibilities that you're taking on. So, it's important to know what you're doing. And the reason I'm making such a big point about this is because if you do join a small nonprofit board of directors, there may or may not be sophisticated governance within that organization, meaning that all the resources for you to fully understand how to best act as a board member, they may not be easily accessible within that organization. So if you're going to put yourself in that role, it's incumbent on you to make sure that you're prepared for what you're stepping into. Ultimately, what a board of directors do is they're governing. And governing in general as a concept is putting together and considering a system by which an organization is controlled and operates, and the mechanisms by which and its people are held to account. So I'm a strategist. I work as a strategy consultant. And so I think a lot about systems and structures and procedures and that type of thing. So when I think of how I advise clients, governance is a big part of that conversation, because how you set up your organization predicates how it's going to flow, how it's going to work, and whether or not it's going to succeed. So what you see here is a bit of an example of an org chart where you've got a CEO in the middle, and we understand how an org chart works, where people report to a CEO. So these are senior management, and then maybe here's some more junior staff members reporting up to a CEO. So that typical kind of pyramid. Now, a CEO will often, and has to, in a small nonprofit, report to a board of directors. So what's interesting up top is you'll see this pyramid gets inverted. These people jointly supervise the CEO and the executive level of the organization. There's no one person on top, and that's by design. So if a nonprofit is incorporated in Canada and Ontario, the governments say that, listen, this organization, this nonprofit is not owned by anybody, but rather a group of people come together and agree to act as stewards of the organization to advance the best interest of the organization, to advance its mandate, to advance its mission. So it's nobody's per se. No one person owns it. There's a group of members or shareholders that conceptually own it or have responsibility for it. And then they appoint this board of directors, this top row, to make sure that things are running well in their absence. So there's a core concept that's baked in there called fiduciary responsibility. So if you are joining a board, and I show a picture like this because boards of directors are not always sitting around kind of formal, stuffy board tables, but especially in the case of smaller nonprofits, it can be much more casual and it's dynamic. There's a concept of fiduciary responsibility, which means if you take on this role, you are taking on an obligation to act impartially and in the best interest of the organization. So you've heard of concepts like conflicts of interest, which we know you shouldn't do things to benefit yourself by leveraging the organization, but it goes further than that. Fiduciary responsibility means saying, I'm going to be responsible for this organization. And in fact, in the eyes of the law, you are, by being a board member of an organization, you are saying that I take responsibility for what happens to the affairs of this organization. I will make sure that, the executives, the CEO, that those people are doing their job. So there is an amount of liability that comes with this. So boards of directors will often have things like directors and officers liability insurance and things like that to ensure that you're covered because you are taking on this very personal responsibility. Now, when we say this term board, I kind of explained to you what the very formal definition is of a board of directors of a registered corporation. but sometimes this term is used a little bit more casually or in different contexts. So it may benefit you to understand the distinction or clarifications behind this concept in different ways. You might often hear something like an advisory board. And quite often an advisory board is not a governance board. It's a board, so it's a group of people that's put together for a particular purpose, but it actually isn't delegated with legal authority or responsibility over a corporation. So if we think of Next Niagara is an initiative of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, which is the corporation. So technically, the advisory board members, or I'm not sure the exact name of the board that Next Niagara uses to refer to itself, is more of an advisory board or a working board, which does not have liability or fiduciary responsibility for an organization. Technically, that responsibility lies with the board of directors of the Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce, and they delegate authorities down to the leaders of Next Niagara, who are doing an excellent job in taking that responsibility, but ultimately GNCC is responsible. You may hear terms like board executive. So boards often have a chairperson, a treasurer who is responsible for overseeing financials, a secretary who's responsible for the organization's minutes and keeping track of its affairs. So board executives, they're not superior to the rest of the board members or directors. They just have additional responsibilities. So everybody is a director, and then some people have other jobs like being the chair, which has a set of responsibilities, being the treasurer, etc. Now, there's other types of boards. You might hear terms like governors or regents or trustees. Quite often, these are referring to the same concept of being a director. But some of the other organizations that you may not have thought of as kind of a board of directors would be, for example, of members of parliament. And I'm showing this beautiful picture of Ottawa on Parliament Hill. So, for example, we vote for our members of parliament in Canada, and they go represent us, right? So we're the shareholders as citizens of Canada, or the members as citizens of Canada, and we elect somebody amongst our riding, so our kind of geographic area, to go and represent us at Parliament in Ottawa. So these, I think 332, if my most recent counting is correct, members of Parliament essentially form a board of directors of Canada. And they have legislative authority and responsibility, meaning we elect them to put in place laws, that's their main job, for Canada, that we are all going to agree to abide by, or councillors. So if you think of your local city council, we elect those councillors, and they essentially act as the board of directors of the municipal corporation of your city. So Niagara has a bunch of cities or towns. They have their town councils or city councils, and those corporations, you may not have realized that when you say the city in your city, you're typically referring to the corporation of the city, is actually chartered under the province. So the province basically says, hey, these corporations called cities can exist, and we'll allow them to govern themselves this ways. But the province actually maintains jurisdiction over the cities. So you may remember a few years back when our premier, Doug Ford, chose to reduce the size of Toronto City Council unilaterally. He had the authority to do that because the province oversees and has jurisdiction over cities. So within this general concept, we say the word board. There's a lot of nuances within it, a lot of different terms that are used. I've just kind of given you a kind of a high level overview of some of the circumstances and nuances. So let's get to the meat of this presentation, leading and learning. If you're listening to this presentation, you may have already been thinking about, or I may have stimulated you to be thinking about, should I join a board of directors? And if so, why should I join a board of directors? And I'm going to categorize this under two categories: leading, relating, and your community impact, and learning, your personal development. So what's in it for your community and what's in it for you? So a lot of time, and especially for young professionals, we think of boards of directors as these older, experienced people who really know how things run. And so that's who should be on a board of directors, because after all, they are directing the affairs of an organization. However, what is important for you to realize is that we have often leadership deficits in our community, especially with small nonprofits. There's a lot of organizations that need specific knowledge. So for example, if you're a young professional and you're an accountant, or you're in marketing communications, or you're in human resources, or any kind of domain or skill set, quite often small nonprofits don't have big staff, and they get tremendous value out of you bringing your specific skill sets to that board, your ability to understand bookkeeping, your ability to support or advise on marketing communications, on legal, if you're a paralegal or you're a lawyer. I mean, this is tremendously valuable skill sets. So regardless if the fact that you haven't been in your career for 30 years, if you have a few years of experience, if you have 5 years of experience, if you have domain knowledge, that can actually be tremendously valuable to a small nonprofit. And if they're looking around their board table, they should be looking at skill sets that they need to fill. So again, you may not be long and deep in your career, but if you have relevant domain knowledge in an area of expertise, your skill sets are valuable. Your ideas, energy, and enthusiasm. For the staff, for the stakeholders, for the other board members in the nonprofit, you just bringing your ideas, your energy, that vibrancy that you can bring to an organization are tremendously valuable. It's something that you have as somebody being younger, being ambitious. If you're listening to this presentation, if you're attending, engaged, and I know you're ambitious and you're enthusiastic. So bringing that to the table actually can be a very positive asset to an organization, right? So you have that to bring. And as well, your networks and relationships. So when you join an organization through a role of being a board member, you bring all your connections, your influence, your engagement to that organization. So these are 3 ways under leading there where you actually can potentially add tremendous value in spite of the fact that you may not have served on boards before, you may not have a ton of experience. In the next slide, I'm going to talk about some of the nuances of determining the right fit. But just know that you do have a lot to offer, and this isn't necessarily something you need to wait until late in your career to do. You may actually be able to offer a lot of value right now. So if you're thinking about the different ways that you can make an impact on your community, this may be a great one. On the other side of the coin is what's in it for you, right? And I've categorized that under learning or your personal development. Throughout my career, I've got tremendous value from understanding governance. In fact, as you heard during my introduction, I run a consulting business. And if you're joining a small nonprofit or most nonprofits, you aren't going to be getting paid for your volunteer leadership role with that organization. As you grow throughout your career, there are for-profit boards that you can join that you will get paid for. That's something that I do, and I wouldn't have been able to get to this place if I hadn't put in the work and developed myself in a nonprofit or leadership capacity. And quite often I get paid to advise boards, to help restructure boards. So my expertise around governance has helped me as a professional, as a consultant. And even if you're working within an organization, it can help you understand how do boards run. So maybe in your day job, you work for a bigger company and you want to understand, your company and your boss and the CEO reports into a board of directors. How does that work? What is that dynamic? How can I relate to it? Being part of a board of directors and learning the ropes and governance can actually help you with understanding and advancing your career because you know how these organizational structures work. Networking is a big component. So what I found is that by jumping into a board of directors, it's another way to relate to a different organization, a different set of people, a different part of the world. So for me, it's been tremendously valuable in expanding my networks, and I'll explain some of my examples in closing off the presentation. In terms of profile building, if you're on this conference, I can tell that you're community oriented. And if you're community oriented, I can tell you that being part of the action going on in Niagara, it's a long game, right? I've had my experience for 10, 15 years. And if you're going to be in your community, people keep a track record. They know how you've contributed to the community. They know how you've advanced throughout your career. This is a great way that's complementary to your day job, to your professional work, to develop your profile. And the last one is changing the world. I mean, I think all of us who are ambitious and community oriented think about how can we make a difference. So from the perspective of your personal satisfaction, getting involved in a board of directors can be a great way to quote unquote change the world. And the second kind of meaty slide that I want to dig into that I think you'll take a lot away from is how do you go about this? And I'm going to categorize this in 2 kind of simple ways to understand. The first one is treat it like a job. So the same way when you're looking for a job, you would look at a job description. So there should be a job description for a volunteer board role. You should be looking and you should be considering whether or not it's the right fit for you. So it should be with an organization and a cause that you're passionate about. If not, why bother? You should be going in there and being excited about this, and you're going to be giving your time and energy, and you won't be getting paid, most likely. So you need to make sure that you care about the cause. And also, like when you're looking for a job, you should be applying to jobs that you're qualified for, that you're a good fit for. So organizations may have some experienced directors around the table, and your skill sets, your enthusiasm, your ideas may be a great complement to that expertise. So you can put yourself in a situation where you're actually well qualified as one of the team members around a board table, even though, again, you may not have extensive experience. And just like any other job, present yourself honestly. So tell that prospective board who's considering you what your skill sets are, what your abilities are, what your limitations are, and put a good foot forward. So this is how, the methodology of looking at it like a job. And you can also look at it like a relationship. So you want to think, I'm going to have a relationship with an organization. And the way I'm going to do that is as a board director. So you can go out there and do relationship building, right? Get to know organizations, reach out to board members, reach out to senior leadership, understand how they work, understand what their needs are. And that will allow you on the other side of the ledger to do your best kind of matching job, to put yourself in a position. So just like a job search, right? Open up your set of opportunities, relate, engage, develop relationships, and see where you might be able to best fit in and best add value, so that the organizations you're on a board of can do very well as a result of that, and that you can get a lot out of as well. There's often opportunities that are being put up on LinkedIn. Charity Village is a good resource for seeing job opportunities, and just word of mouth, being involved in the community, keeping your ear to the ground. So treat it this way, treat it like a job, treat it like a relationship. And, that's a way you can kind of make sure you're taking it seriously. Now, kind of closing thought, how do you excel as a board member? And it's complicated, but it's simple at the same time. Please, please, please don't be that person that joins a board, that puts your hand up, that takes up a seat and doesn't show up for meetings, or is always saying, I'll catch up on the notes, or is too busy. Treat this like a sincere obligation that you are taking on. People are counting on you, stakeholders are counting on you, your fellow board members are counting on you. You need to take this seriously. So honor the commitments that you made in taking on this job. Step up, when there is a need for the organization, be there, step up, do what it takes to help the organization succeed. If you're going to take on this role, don't take on one where you have no time. Figure out how many hours a month you're going to need to donate to this exercise, and make sure that you're being honest and integral with doing this. And this is often a challenge in boards, where if people aren't getting paid and there isn't strong accountability mechanisms, people aren't always pulling their weight. So don't be that person. And lastly is developing your capabilities, right? So you want to make sure that you're continually equipping yourself to be a better and better board member. That could be learning on the job. I put a few logos on the side. The Directors College, the Institute of Corporate Directors are two organizations in Canada that have formal board director training. So keep advancing your abilities to be a board director. So just in closing, I got a few fun pictures. This is Empowerment Squared. This is an organization I was involved in creating, being the board member of, being the board chair of. I've been involved in the organization for 12 years. It's quite literally taken me all over the world. We built it from scratch, and now this is a picture in Liberia in West Africa, in the city of Painesville, where we are building the Liberian Learning Center, which is the only public library and publicly available community center in the whole country. We're developing, a new education philosophy for the country. And this was just born out of a kernel of an idea that a friend of mine had to start this organization called Empowerment Squared. So I've gotten so much out of this over the past 12 years. This is a picture from a board of directors I'm on with the Bay Area Health Trust, which is an organization that works on health sciences businesses and supports our local healthcare system. I've had the opportunity to help the creation through my board skills of the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, which is making transformative change around disability justice. And even my business, Wentworth Strategy Group, advisory and governance is one of our core pillars. So literally, I get paid and I've made a business around board engagement. And a lot of it has served even as the base for my first ever TED Talk. So all these pictures just to show that board engagement has been a tremendously rich part of my personal and professional life. And I hope you'll consider it as you think of how you evolve as young professionals. So just in closing, quick message there. Hope you'll consider joining a small nonprofit board of directors supported community. And if you do, please do an excellent job. My contact information is there. I'm more than happy to follow up with you and support you in this journey. And good luck to everybody. And thank you to the organizers for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark John. I know we could probably talk about this for much longer. And so if anyone has any questions, as Mark John said, I would encourage you to reach out, especially if you haven't been part of a board before or feels a little daunting. Take the risk. My background in career coaching, I'll say thank you, Mark John, for also encouraging everyone to make sure their skills match the opportunity and treat it a little bit like a job application too, and sharing your skills. So once again, thank you so much. Thank you for everyone for attending this session. We are going to be taking a break now until 11:30. You'll also note there was a bit of a change to our 11:30 sessions. Unfortunately, one of our speakers had an emergency. So you'll be able to see that Evan's presentation is still available at 11:30, but head over to the breakout room tab. We will see you there. And again, thank you to everyone for joining, and thank you, Mark John. Very much appreciated, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Great. Thank you, Kristen.
See you later. Bye.